Our next presentation is entitled Compliments Can Kill: The Relationship Between Benevolent Stereotyping and Hate Crime. Please welcome Leah Chang.
Before I get into stereotypes and hate crimes, let me just say, ladies, you look beautiful tonight. Gentlemen, those shirts really suit you. Aren't compliments just the best? Don't they give you that warm, toasty feeling inside? They acknowledge our efforts and appreciate our traits. So what's not to like? Nevertheless, compliments have a darker side to them. Oftentimes, some compliments don't apply or pressure you into changing who you are in order to fit that compliment. These compliments are also known as benevolent stereotypes. Benevolent stereotypes are built upon multiple ideas that many of you already know of, like stereotyping. They are generally a combination of a compliment and a stereotype together. Benevolent stereotypes are defined as subjectively favorable beliefs about social groups that directly or indirectly convey superiority. Some examples are that women are emotionally mature, men are mentally and physically strong, African Americans are athletic, Asian Americans are smart, or even that all blondes are fun. These benevolent stereotypes are complements with an inherent sense of betterness and bitterness. This underlying superiority often leads to stereotype threat, which is a psychological phenomenon. It's the anxiety felt by group members that their behavior or performance might be used as confirming evidence for existing stereotypes. Despite all this, many will insist that benevolent stereotypes are harmless and even complimentary. Yet I will be arguing that in reality, benevolent stereotypes are unjust, harmful, and they can even lead to hate crimes. As mentioned earlier, the psychological phenomenon of the suffocating anxiety, also known as stereotype threat, restricts affected individuals through the stress they feel in fear of conforming or even becoming an outlier to their benevolent stereotype. Either way, those who are benevolently stereotyped cannot prosper, with stereotype threat looming over their every decision. This is what happens when compliments don't apply, and yet are forced into your identity. These so-called compliments harm your mind as they force feed an unwanted identity that pushes you into a bottomless pit of anxiety. So how specifically do benevolent stereotypes force feed an unwanted identity? Through stereotype threat, benevolent stereotypes are harmful due to the alarming rates of mental health issues that arise. An example of this is the model minority myth, a misleading belief that Asians are the minority exemplar in American society because they succeed socially, academically, and economically in comparison to what many consider the failing Black and Hispanic minorities. Not only does this myth dehumanize all minorities, but the model minority myth contorts all Asians into high-achieving and intelligent individuals. Furthermore, this benevolent stereotype harms Asians with alarming rates of depression and suicide. The National Center for Injury Prevention and Control reports that for Asian and Pacific Islander women from ages 15 to 24, suicide is the second leading cause of death. This benevolent stereotype displays exactly how individuals are harmed and force-fed an inaccurate identity for both the model minority, but also the other failing minorities. It should be noted that although the model minority pertains specifically to Asians, there are a plethora of other examples that exist, like the benevolent stereotype of African Americans and their athleticism. As a result, society pushes for African American athletics rather than academics. Yet, how do benevolent stereotypes lead to hate crimes? Using Asian Americans and the model minority as another example, Dr. Chang, a professor of criminal justice, found that when Asian American success surpasses the majority group's predetermined limit, they will be met with hate crimes as an assertion of power. In other words, when the majority group witnesses Asian Americans' prosperity, and when that prosperity exceeds the amount they wanted or expected, they will commit hate crimes in order to send a message and assert their power. The Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism reports that in the past 3 years, Asian American hate crimes have risen 339% nationwide. So, when benevolent stereotypes are not addressed at their core or even neglected, hate crimes can very well occur and even intensify over time. Once again, this example pertains specifically to race, but benevolent stereotypes can lead to hate crimes in relation to any targeted group of age, gender, nationality, or religion. Some will argue that despite all this evidence, benevolent stereotypes remain harmless. They remain complementary. An example that will counter this argument is gender. Although there is heavy focus on the racial tensions that arise from benevolent stereotypes, gender is not exempt from these dangerous consequences. A common benevolent stereotype towards women is that they're nurturing and emotional, that women are naturally understanding, they're motherly, and due to this, they're better at reading and writing. These are characteristics that are often deemed as unfit for STEM studies, which require logical, analytical, and rational personalities. A study performed by Dr. Kalan, a researcher of psychological sciences, has found that for when women in STEM are reminded of their nurturing, emotional nature, their math performance was significantly worse than women who were not reminded of their benevolent stereotype. Not only that, but a study from Georgetown University has found that when women in higher education who start with STEM majors, they will often switch to liberal arts majors due to the overwhelming pressures of their benevolent stereotype. These studies prove that benevolent stereotypes are not complementary. They're not harmless. Lives are changed. Aspirations are redirected. And dreams halted. Benevolent stereotypes restrict the blessings that God prepares for his daughters and sons. As Christians, we anticipate a better future in society as we are seemingly surrounded in drowning devastation. But that's all. We expect a sudden change without putting in the work and effort that growth requires. We blame each other for what seems like blatant expressions of hate. But Matthew 7:5 says, "You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." I hope this thesis calls us to examine our hearts, to remove that log that we've mistaken to be a simple, harmless speck. This is how we all can practice loving our sisters and brothers in the same way that God graciously demonstrates to us daily. Thank you.